George Johnson, a fellow named George Johnson. No, it doesn't spring to the top. Up in a little town called Thistle in the Yukon, there's a museum. If you ever get up there, it's called the George Johnson Museum. And I encourage you to go and spend the day there. He was a Tlingit man. And yes, it's pronounced Tlingit, even though it starts with a T, but we learned that. And he was just the most amazing Canadian that you've ever seen or read about. He was a renowned photographer. His photographs, black and white, from the 20s especially. He was a steamboat captain, a paddle wheeler captain, even though they couldn't call him a skipper because he wasn't a citizen, because he was First Nations. So they weren't allowed to be, even though he did the job, they couldn't call him. They had to call him the first mate, even though he ran the boat. But he was one of these people that did everything he ever dreamed of, you would imagine. And one of the coolest things that he did was he bought the very first car in the Yukon. 1928, he had just had a really good season trapping, and like everybody in the Yukon, he did a little bit of everything. He did some trapping, he cut wood for the paddle wheelers. That was a big employment opportunity for people up there. So he'd come in after a good winter's trapping, and he saw these contraptions coming off the ship in Whitehorse, which is the only place that had any roads in the whole of the Yukon at the time. He said, "What are those?" And they told him. He said, "Okay, how much are they?" They were $1,000 in 1928. He had lots of money from his trapping, so he paid him cash and arranged the delivery. And he went back to Teslin, where there was no roads. He hired a crew to make a road for him, to make a 3-mile road around the town, and then he would rent it out for rides for a nickel apiece. People could be in a car, and that was cool enough. But then he would paint it white in the winter, so he put big studs on it. He would drive on the lake. Teslin Lake is 80 miles long, and he would hunt moose with the car painted white. They couldn't see him coming up, and there are stories of multiple families that were only alive because he fed them, because he went out and got them food. And then he would paint it green in the fall for duck season. And then he would paint it black in the summer. And the thing about George, he never took any of the old paint off. So when they bought the car to create the museum, they decided they wanted this car. When they got it, it had 2 inches of paint. It was all the old lead paint, the good stuff. But George, he lived such an enormously full life. I mean, if any of us could be blessed to live that full of a life, we'd be lucky. And when we started looking into it, one of the things that we found out was about the ship that delivered it, which was called the Thistle. And it was a paddle wheeler owned by a company called Taylor Drury, who were 2 men who, during the rush of 1898, the gold rush, they met in a pub in Whitehorse, and they decided all this mining is that's too tough for us. We can make better, if we start a merchant company. So they did, and very quickly they had 13 outposts all on the rivers of the Yukon, and 3 paddle wheelers that they bought when they were decommissioned. And one of them was the Thistle, and it was the vehicle that brought George's car, the very first car in the Yukon, up to Tesla. So we heard this story, and a song came out. It's partially a tribute to the Thistle itself, but it's also just our homage to George Johnson, because he was just such an incredible man. So thanks all for coming out tonight. Thanks Joe and Jim, as always, for being these stalwart people that bring music to Osoyoos, and we appreciate it. So this is the Mighty Thistle. It's one of the songs on the CD, so if you have that, you can listen to it on the way home. So you got to imagine the chug of the wheels. The thing about the Thistle, it had a really low draft, and it's a 16-foot wheel and really shallow, so it was generally the first ship that would get in the spring and the last one they'd see. And for people that lived on the river, that was everything for them. As soon as the boats stop coming, they're frozen up until they start coming again. So. The Thistle was a river over 16 feet of wheel. She pushed the Yukon River, made of her from bow to heel. Delivering for Taylor Drury all supplies in need. lifeline of the river, what you meant to one and all. George Johnson was a singing man whose mind was rich with thought. In a land that had no roads, a car one day he bought, and drove along the frozen lake, amazing one and all. He painted white in winter, black in summer, green in fall. So hail the mighty Thistle, she's the first ship after winter and the last in seeing fall. Hail the mighty Thistle, the lifeline of the river, what you meant to one and all. In August 1929, way out on Lake Labarge, Thistle pushed the river with her tow line to a barge. The line it snapped the skipper back, the ship was torn in two. And there that stormy afternoon, the Thistle she was through. So hail the mighty Thistle, she's the first ship after winter